Thank you for coming to the first poem present reading of the season. When I first ventured up the stairwell to the English department's new home in Walker and Rosenwald halls, passing, to my surprise, the people from economics, moving into their new offices on the floors just below, it occurred to me that Dante would have loved campus maps. Here's an idea. Let's put the avaricious next to the sullen and ill-tempered. Institutional infernos aside, the juxtaposition has its own curious logic. For several decades now, economics has held a powerful, if not mutual, fascination for people who think about literature. We talk about libidinal economies, circulation and exchange, the cultural logic of late capitalism, borrowing the language of money to speak about what used to be thought of as beauty. Of course, poets have been doing this sort of thing for quite a while now. Having been a tenant long to a rich lord, not thriving, I resolved to be bold and make suit unto him to afford a new, small rented lease and cancel the old, wrote George Herbert in the poem Redemption, which provides the epigraph to Susan Wheeler's extraordinary new collection of poetry, Ledger. From Herbert's studies of spiritual indebtedness, to Wordsworth's critique of getting and spending, to Pound's jeremiads on the international credit system, poetry has long sought to make money unfamiliar, denaturalized, strange. But in Wheeler's work, we find something entirely different. Here is a text in which money makes poetry strange. This is because in Ledger, money talks. And money's voice is difficult, at times verging on capital, with a capital C's, indifference toward our psyche's capacity to take in the shock of true bills. In the poem Anthem, a Pop-Tart TM hits the plate somewhere in Gary, Indiana, and it is as if the global machinery of commerce has been brought to bear upon the branding through that tiny superscript TM of the poetry of everyday life. This is not, however, language poetry, with its dream of undermining the governing economic order. Wheeler is more of an elegist than a revolutionary, as she investigates the cost-benefit ratio of our fall into exchange. In a poem about childhood called The Green Stamp Book, she writes, "Can I have?" And the song's begun, memorializing those economies of desire that first drive one into utterance. And it's not such a long way from there to the barbaric yops of the stock pit, the competing jingles of the postmodern marketplace, the jangling discourse of our nation. With apologies to Stephen Levitt and the residents of the Fourth Circle in Rosenwald, you might think of this collection as a kind of poetic Freakonomics. But listen closely, and you'll hear a human voice at the center of the ringing registers, a voice that echoes, "I put my hand upon my heart, and there felt naught but need." Susan Wheeler is the author of 4 collections of poetry, Bag of Diamonds, Smokes, Source Codes, and Ledger, and of Record Palace, a novel. Her awards include the Witter-Binner Prize for Poetry from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Norma Farber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America, 2 Pushcart Prizes, and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation and the New York Foundation for the Arts. On the creative writing faculties of Princeton University and the New Schools Graduate Program. She's also taught at Columbia University, the University of Iowa, Rutgers, and New York University. Please join me in welcoming Susan Wheeler.
Thank you so much for that introduction. There were some notices that I'd also be reading fiction. So if there's anyone here for that, I'm going to read 2 pages very quickly, and then you can leave if you're not interested in the poems. And I'll set it up with a poem first. I just wanted to read a little bit of one of the narrator's voices in the novel Record Palace. And earlier, while I was working on the book, I'd had a lot of trouble with I'm a poet, so I had a lot of trouble with plot. So at a certain point, out of frustration, I wrote a sonnet to the main character, and so this should introduce you to him. He ran a basement record store up on State Street, actually in Chicago, in 1980, before the advent of CDs, or sort of right on the cusp when they really were LPs. You've been pure trouble since I thought you up, AC. Hairnet, glass eye, a wormy dick through stretch pants across a girth so thick even your dog don't jump. I dared you drop onto pages without a plot and make for one. Your diffidence don't stack up to jack shit so far, you mangy crank, your bunions in the split of your flip-flop sock. I need your help here. Where's your gallantry? Can't you muscle the corner by Chick Corea near the Twofer's bin at the door? Could a hitman intrude, you lose the store, your lost love from Kansas City reappear, our real-life bond, dead AC, start to steer? So this is just 2 pages from towards the beginning of the novel, but it's sort of already underway, and he has his brother, William, who's a bassist of some note, has just died. AC lives in Chicago. He flew to New York for the funeral. His sister-in-law, his brother's widow, is named Philomena, or Philly, and she's quite a woman to contend with, and she is involved with something he's not quite sure about, but when he gets back to Chicago, she calls and says that her place was looted. At the same time, his son, who's a kind of slick guy, writes for jazz criticism and does DJs a program on the radio overnight in Chicago, picks him up at the airport, and on the way back from O'Hare, they're almost run off the road, and AC doesn't know what's going on. He puts Philly for the night when she arrives upstairs in the SRO, SRO Hotel, the Carlton Arms, which the record store is in the basement of. And Bowtie, his son, insists on staying in the back of the record store where AC has his place. In the morning, there is even sun through the back window. The vehicles progressing on State Street slop and the thaw is on. No shoes to be seen, Philly in the hotel, my dick continent. I think there may be a new day dawning. Bowtie comes out of the back looking slept. He has a cup of coffee for me in his grip and another stewing on the stove. Old Mills Brothers on the platter turner. This is the way a man's life should be, I think, way mine has been until now. Bowtie says Johnson at the Carlton Arms would not take my money for Philly, and he pulls it out of his trousers and hands it over to me, and then he goes back for his coffee. Bowtie has begged me for the cash off and on, but he will not just take it, which I know comes out of my genetic constitution. All this bodes so good I feel generous. Johnson, I owe you, I say in the phone. Johnson grunts in his end. And will you tell that woman I am taking her to breakfast? I will be sending the son around for her. Johnson growls, and I hear the dial tone. I let Bowtie nurse his coffee, and I look at his shirtless chest and the scar across his collarbone and think once I had that chest and better. Don't wear the flip-flops, AC, Bowtie says. Embarrassing the air is another promising endeavor. Warm as a woman, I say, look at the sun. My footwear of choice is a perennial beef with him. He gets his nag from the maternal line. He's not even listening to himself, hardly me. Bowtie is gnawing at his own cheek and staring with a glaze at the dog. I feed Ma kibbles one at a time from the bag, and she is pert at attention for them. Billy ate half my order last night, and I am hard up for some bacon. Bowtie shakes himself. That woman is big. 6 months in front, 9 months behind, I say. Ever notice her shoes? Bowtie tell me. In New York, they're piled up like logs by a fire. There is a catch at the moment. Bowtie, when have you been to her place? I saw her and William when I was there in August. I told you. And here I am thinking you did not know your uncle enough to be missing him. I told you, AC, like hell. Could spoil a day, but it don't. I send Bowtie upstairs to collect Philomena in all of her splendiferous getup. By the time she comes down in a hat the size of Cleveland, I got the gate double locked and am parting the slush on the steps with my slap shoes. Bowtie points out an icicle on the roof. We all look up at the melt. So that's all the fiction, so those of you for fiction, it's over. I'm going to read up to the new book, just a couple of poems from each book. And I'll start with Bag of Diamonds, the first book. The Bell. Sad that porking verb. I went down with the fancy dyke to the parts store then, and that Billy crafted up an Erasma like as not the Benz. Nice legs. Felicity, a mom that's got a skittish grin for every time the car door slams. Come again. Coquette, off, on, and when that lady turns her eye on you depends. A girl labels each excretion in a box. Mom's beat. I like to say the tigers than the fear of far cry from complete. Come gently. Wash those high boys here. And a poem to my brother. Somebody pointed out that my brother's in like 90% of these poems in the first collection. How anyone would ever tell, I don't know, but The Privilege of Feet. Superb wandering this, glacier unfed by light, the object of fidelity, or the azure wildflower bending. It is not so much embellishment, this reasoning into language. His first word was breakfast, his second porridge. Then he learned to mate 2 halves of a limonite concretion on a shelf. His tiger's cap brushed against his glasses. He tried peeing in the sink from the top of the toilet seat. He called geology geodesy. And does this fabric account for the fiction of family? Too many highballs, too much sun. The starboard tack arrested the brunt of the luffing, and several careful swimmers took a dive, thinking nothing of the decorative this became. Head first, a word described as festive. From Smokes, this is a poem called Ethic. It's sort of difficult to read, but it's short at least. Maman got a special syrup to cure the lonelies. All night up the tree of the pickling shed, I's drinking from it elixir. After the sun up the hacked meat had come, the truck it seethes on its brakes, and the driver he look, I swinging from the friendly tree. Then it smote. What business is mine in the cardboard rune in the native wrap? I on the tree stump, I missing all. And at some point, it sort of seized me to write a version of a really wonderful poem that there's no reason there should be another version of. It's just wonderful, by Heine, called Wiedersehen. So this is Meeting Again after Heine. The moon rose like a blooming flower. The tin in the hand clattered its charge. We walked by in the wavering hour, I looking away, you chattering hard. Met by luck with like destinations, we startled again at what ended in peak. Strollers out seeing us had no notion. A car alarm cycled its querulous shriek. 8th Street sank in the crack of its nightfall. You pressed your satisfactions on me. You in your urgency remarked, after all, kindling your passion was enmity. Passion had finally erased your calm, made composure a prop of the past. I mugged that street noise, din, bedlam prevented my hearing your story at last. As I walked home, the strollers were thinning. The moon bobbed above roofs like a ball. The shade at the bus stop waved to me beckoning, and I nodded fast in the fast night fall. And this is called Clock Radio, Expunging Ponge. That each second escorts a fresh plash. Slatted awning, rec room wall, bald black translucence, the numerals flip. The methodical tumbling drives it to hum at the pitch it extracts from the wires. Its cousins in Holland sing slightly higher. Its march it propels with reluctance. Its drive is for the offbeat, the cock-handed, the apocopated. It sings with regret for its thrum. The clock radio strives to become its grandfather only with ambivalence, spilling its pool on the nightstand with a modesty and steadiness in the clicks of its onerous job, in the particles that swirl in its wake. And this is a poem called Cassius. Do not fell the smallest to spare the tallest. Do not braid with umbrage the hair of repose. Do not trifle with holy expectations. Do not make of me an exception. Do not bargain fast the last of it. Do not gentle go within that tower. Do not splay the legs or tend the sour. Do not make of me an exception. Do not fail the one who loves you most. Do not recognize the incognito. Do not milk the sow of introspection. Do not make of me an exception. Gotten to Ledger, and I've had a request for the final poem in it, which is a long one, but there's a narrative, and I wish that I was able to show you a slide of the painting, but since the poem describes it about 7 times, I think you'll get the picture. And it's a fairly familiar painting that may ring a bell once we're into it. It's a painting that was painted by Quentin Massys in 1514 in Antwerp, and Antwerp figures in the poem as well as the painting. And I don't think there's necessarily anything else you need to know, except, of course, it's called The Debtor in the Convex Mirror, and once I'd waded into the poem, I realized that there was a debtor in the convex mirror in the painting, and there was no turning back from dealing with self-portrait in a convex mirror. So that becomes part of it too. He counts it out. By now from abroad there are shillings and real. Bohemian silver fills the new coins. But his haul is gold, et sous au soleil, excellent mostly. Wafers thin and impressed with their marks, milled New World's gold, the Spanish pluck, or West African ore, Portugal's slave sling. The gold wafers gleam in their spill by the scale. Calm before gale, what bought a sack a century before almost buys a sack now, the price revolutions to come. A third of a mason's, a master one's day's wage funds the night's wine for his crew after a big job wraps up. As for dried herring, his day's wage would buy 15 meal for a big do. His workers just 9, 18 strew. Calm in his commerce is the businessman, and his wife their disheveled shelves. She turns a page, her hands are in God, but her gaze is on Ange Noble and pearls, weights in gold rings, 1 florin in pan, 1 in his hand. What sink they are in? Calm their regard luxe, volupté le mien. Fur trimmings on jackets, gemstones on fingers, while the debtor in the mirror has spent what he has on the red hat he's in. Prayer book illumined. Luxury that, and to ignore only more. Calmed by the calculation of interest, though the figure's been clear for a good quarter hour, the moneylender withholds it and waits. The debtor is better with fuzz in his head. In truth, he's distressed. Cares like the shield impressed in the Yesu dint the meat of his brow beneath the red hat. What's he reading or faking? Caught in the curve of an office's alarm, an ante to crime, a drugstore's big boon, long centuries to come. The debtor, about to receive knell to what peace he might otherwise recall, worries his page. Ability for reading silently may not be his. The lender's wife puts him to shame, though the shame in this is the least of his shames. In the yard beyond her waits one of his leaners for the gold of another. Schoolmarms ahoy! Scrap history, the parable, the prayer of the illustrated hours she trembles to hold. He's got his gold, she's mesmerized or not by its sheen, the debtor's lost to our reflecting of him. But it's without a measurement is made. A figure's gesture on the gravated street, the fury of a face in its face, behind the door ajar, the fingers of the leaner demarcating fast, the size of a peck or a pecker not so. The debt is as large as a giant's back turning, large as a volcanic forge, and fragment of the debt him burst, size of its toy, intense regard. Fume individually, fume, borrower, clipper, catcher, coiner, getter, grabber, hoarder, loser, lover, raiser, spender, teller, thirster. Scrivener lays out upon collateral, but what has the red hat? 0, and then some. So here you are, master. These ideas, said Friedlander, were common possession, free booty, fair game. A painting by Jan van Eyck, 80 years before Massey's, glimpsed and described in Milan but now lost, was its model. Banker and wife. The portrait of Giovanni Arnolfini in a red hat, not unlike Massey's debtor, and a year earlier, Arnolfini and his wife at their marriage, we know. In the latter, the self Van Eyck daubed in its own convex mirror, one of 4 figures, affixed like a crucifix on the backdrop of wall, rides the conjoined hands as a charm. But nothing foreshadowed the hand of your own. Your painters, 19, set off for Rome with the jewel of his art. Hand in the gem of its bulge, the hand the Pope Pronto kissed with commission, a job, you note, never come through. Genre derives from the devotional, beauty and Ange on one side, deformity by vice on the other, or so said Friedlander. He found the wife's gaze full of dispirit, lofty sadness. She and her husband are, yes, tight-lipped. The palm of the hand, like the open mouth, were Massey's registries of emotionality, he wrote, but the souls in this painting have neither. Sentimentally, it pleases Massey's to feel sorrow, and grief takes on mild forms. Worries otherwise, Massey's St. Anthony elsewhere, tempted by courtesans, peaks his brows, wild, broken peaks, same as the moneylender's debtor. So much for effects of Massey's virtuoso, whose pyrotechnics, new wine poured into old bottles, welled from a kind of nervous energy, in any event, not from the heart. The antithesis of artist, Friedlander still. This, the debtor to Leonardo, to Van Eyck, may well have known, knowledge well welling his brows in the mirror the moneylender ignores. My guide in this matters is yourself, your own soul permeable by beauty, and mine not even by the swirling of facts leveling. How far indeed can the soul swim out through the eyes and still return safely to its nest? That it be possible, I cannot leave, though around me and the art I fail. Therese was the lookout. She watched the cashier in the convex mirror, and I watched Jean Shrimpton on the point of purchase long before it had its name. Therese, careful, Catholic, pregnant and smoking. Lips, lipstick. I took the cylinder in my fingers and slipped it to Christmas. Therese to the racks, 17, Tiger Beat. A few moments more and we'd be through the door. Maybe it was in the painter's hand, out for a dole, so close with Clement's promise that he sought a soul. And these coins, fragments of a web, Mary sat and did not labor despite her Martha's sting. It's still tonight. The peepers out self-restrain. Sometimes a welling up, I've lost thought and images, night, a blank, the stars just stars, the sternies prick like wind. Kid's bicycle and its rim under the road lamp chill as ice, a soul could be blank as these bald things are blank, or so we thought. So this much we have. Banker and wife waist up at table, she with her prayer book watching the gold coins spill on the surface before us. What we see in their clothes is the waist cinch, her red seamy bodice, his jacket, furred collars and cuffs. Behind them just two shelves, account books and objects. Then, out a window or door, two figures obscured but for faces and heads, one forefinger and thumb in a U. In the fore of the table, a diverging mirror, gold frame askew, and by his reflected place, we viewers, sitting right where we are, a red-hatted man who holds a book to his chin as though he is sunning. Rather, he's reading, or trying by the fold in his brow. Real light, long, late day slants through the window above him where a steeple's filigrees revealed, and that's all. Most agree the red-hatted reader's the painter. It matches his portrait from Wierix's engraving. The clothing's outdated. The banker's wife's bodice derives from the portrait Van Eyck did of his wife Margaret in that weird horned hat. And St. Eligius, patron of goldsmiths, converter of Antwerp, in Christus's scene had a curved mirror turned toward outdoors. Copies of Massis come later. They drop the debtor, insert a messenger. Imitators of Massis update the coins. Not that the convex tondo inside of a painting was not a dozen a dime, not just Massis, not just Van Eyck, it was in the wind blowing, in Brabant, in Ghent, in Bruges, Anvers, through the Burgundy hold, fresh off a pub's hall and into the workshop, popping up through the gills, ghastly cliché it was then. But we get ahead, rewind to the lowlands, begin. Astonishing city. A rube, let's say Charles, onions in sacks slung on his mule's back. He a standout in his corset, enters this Antwerp, inhales as he draws near the docks. Gulls swoop, three fuggers, capitalists in wool Dicadinin speaking abreast in deliberate tread, stop him cold crossing his path. Street stalls of changers, merchants with money, crates unloading, fish, sugar by Spaniards and Danes, dragoman emitting unrecognizable tongues, such swirl over Charles in our genre-esque scene. In the movie, we'd hear the THX cluck, hooves in their wary trades forth. What little Charles knows of this place, he has heard at the fairs in the median towns outlying the western Ypres. On the way there'd been Ghent, its self-satisfied sense, talk there of trade throttled by this guild or that, trade nip and tuck against Bruges, Antwerp, said an oiler in Dens. Up and comer it is, if you want one that is. Hub of all nations, market of kings, nothing there either to stand in the way of a man with ambition or a star in his bush. No, if you're smart, you'll go there and quick. Charles had nodded and drunk from his mug, but the notion then planted by the man took root. Now in the pitch of the persons and the royal of the merchants, Charles sees there the commerce, purposeful, restive, serene, a trade's unself-consciousness, a self-sufficiency and such, and Charles is impressed. His own small purse pendant in his pocket feels slight but sufficient to one. On a bean, the young lady says to him not 3 days later. She's forthright as a slip, and at once he wants the pocket fuller, a past that's not his. A girl of means she could show him her whole shelf of books, her writing room, her verses that denounce the psalm sop, Luther. Like his sins are worse than ours, she'll say to those more worthy of answer. Town, common to all nations, Guicciardini later wrote of the city, first capitalist center in the modern sense, wrote Schuppner. When Charles and Massey shared Antwerp, its reign had just begun. Each week brought scores of foreigners, folded in like butter, out to let a household kept kempt in local fashion clean, its denaterie in order and its linens boiled and hung. Down Golden Street, the house that's held by the Hanseatic Corn Market. Across the way, the square that will become in a score of years the world's first stock exchange. Shops fragrant with Portuguese spices beckon with the latest haul. The merchant moneylender leans to the obsolescence of his coins. The paper debts he trades more in leave gold to the unconjoined. Sole debtors like this painter worrying his paper text. Livres tournois, the French would call them, units of money valued at a Roman pound, and livre, book. Not the first time the two are confused. Charles, counting his ducats, catches a red hat from the coin of his eye, costume of a century before. It's Massey's, he sees. The painter's off to work in the salt-crusted air, preparing, away from the shadow of a city siphon you wrote of the life of the studio, his self to be seen. New York tonight boils in its heat wave. The sidewalks burn souls. Haze like a coat warms up the ones out. Prague floods. The markets inside flip, each day doubling back the day before, lobbing, the stalk that holds coral bells tracing its arbitrary round. Perhaps the U on the street is a score. Principal export, ask Bernays, he'll know. Buy low. The painter in the mirror wants privacy, not this call that invades the reading of a book. Your own looked out at us, but mine, Massey's, disingenuous, masquerading, stressed and damp, doesn't. Weightier things on his mind he's got not. But he only pretends to absorption. It's we who discern the privacy he wants, we who can see what he lacks. It's as though we're instructed to trust the lender, his own fix being more, well, sequestered. The last century mind focus is a notion, and even here in Manhattan, a delirium of sorts swabbing its streets, we tread with the intensity of hounds, plugged into our earpiece conjointments, or collecting loose change off of cuffs. Massey's grimace under-dramatizes our lot. That's right. That's what makes genres. Pink ribbon, blue bob, thaler for the watched fob. No, thalers come later. Not much, you prig. Later enough. So, the grasping soul is unredeemed. Freak accident, yeah, guy goes up a hill in thorns, ends up on a stick. Not quite, not impaled, more tacked up, yeah. And the grasping soul goes clean. Maybe it's our internalness we're stuck on. Oh, Captain me, oh consciousness, the soul negotiates its right of way, oh consciousness, but not without a bargain struck, without Why, all or nothing is what Charles thinks, watching the painter disappear, oh, Captain me, in a costume fit to paint. After all, Charles doesn't know the painter's destination. In a cloud left by dusty wheels, he, oh, Captain me, oh, hears a boy call, Natura, Naturata, red, blemish, herring, and wells with tears. Impossible, oh consciousness, that this he heard. Silt eyes, silt ears, coppers up in an older voice, murmuring away. Strange songs of spring that reached the rube in worsted wraps, wheels clattering about his self, while each breath emarginate clangs to differentiate its action from the world's. O Captain me, sad country sack negociant kneels in the dust to pray. He crams so much in, Massis. And then I reached that time in life when, all my spices scattered, every story turned lapsarian. Every surface filled with hardware, pots, Geatons, a collector's box. The world impresses back, impresses with a shield or beast or profile of a noble sort, the same impressions, though the edges of each coin be irregular and bent, it being half a century before dye standardized. And even then, this penny black with chewing gum, that one having seen the inside of a shoe, this none but a banker's roll, the analogy goes grim. Or is it metaphor what we strive for, we poets, bookmakers with the odds of slugs? We don't need paintings or doggerel, and on this too you're true. The man hand-making his ewe in the yard knows Massis, a kite man, a bad risk, a debtor, all glow and show and then off world with him, each time intent to aliment not only he but they, world, what comes his way gives way. Even tonight here, stampede of slugs and all that enters here in pages strewn in air report and digit pulse, his way. The debtor does not know his debt to the skittering city, the bank of birds up a skyscraper's flank, patience of his creditors, what does a trust in surfaces ensure but faith that the surfaces move? Blue surroundings, your nose welling in the car mirror's arc, my own in the hubcap hull. What is this but an arrangement of figures on an open field? But they overlap, and this is the heart, despite Friedlander, the heart of the bind of the debtor, a debt becoming due. Inveigling the day to take orders from him, such a ray from the cathedral still in construction for which Massis metalwork is said to encircle a well, the red-hatted man pretends. The soul encumbers what no other soul knows? Think again. The mirror lies between two scales, one banker's, one maker's, and Massis is but writ in its glass. It's the man in the courtyard, the jig up with fingers, who will reckon the dark fundamentals once the weigh-ins are done. And the world impresses him too. The world overlaps them, indentures them both. Car door bangs. Dark Brooklyn, dark clattering night. Though the lineage is strong for the sons of moneylenders, daughters don't carry. They get the short end. The debtor's excuses are many for the false fealty of her deeds. Adepted outline Friedlander met. Ready angle of the couple's arms, echo of the angle in the glass, her limpid face, lit soul. Debtor's histrionics, a painter's joke, shallow as they go. Car door creaks its opening, back for a pack of cigarettes, side mirror loose, door slam. Wheeled overland, the Venetian goods and cotton from Levant, from Venice are writ up in the noon sun and portside and certified lading. The paper suffices for sugar and salt. And I'll finish with some doggerel. I heard someone say that this is about Walter Benjamin, and I very much wish that it were. It's actually straight out of a record, bizarrely, that my father gave us when we were kids. It's called Benny the Beaver. Benny's tail would only drum. All day while fellow beavers drug the tree limbs to the riverbank, Benny slapped his tail to bang a beat on hollow logs, keen for external analogs to the hums within his head. Benny's folks despaired. Hey, Weisenheimer, shape up or else. Else he chose, and so was helped clean off to military camp. Would it cure his cooking beat from manifesting inappropriately? Some feat. If Benny tried, it didn't show. All day long his tail did shake and set up such a strapping quake the slaving campers riled. Quad they, Benny's antics are not fair. We'd love to lollygag on air drumming for sheer sound alone. Camp authorities thought alike and banished Benny from the dam. Dizzy, mournful Benny, damned to wander up the mountainside, thought himself worthless. So at the top he fixed to plummet off the tip. Above the tree line odd silence fell, his footfalls each were bombs. When suddenly up from far below a curdling yell that seemed to make his name. Benny! Did he hallucinate? The trappers are coming, Benny, set to. What's needed's a bang, a racket by you. And Benny complied. With his tail he raised a cacophony that sent the traders hieing, tailed their bejesus out. Hail Benny the Beaver, to him we owe all, and indeed they did. The Benjamin School for Drumming draws the best of beavers to study drums, and Benny, he's dead. Thank you.